My story is one of abandonment. It is one that was filled with neglect and every type of abuse that you can imagine, but it is also one of great success. The unfortunate side of having an abandonment wound that started pretty much at birth is that you learn to self-abandon. I began losing myself and my parents from a very, very early age, becoming whoever they needed me to be, whoever they wanted me to be, so that I would get breadcrumbs. I mean, just to have my basic needs met, let alone receive love and attention. And when you spend the first 17 years of your life observing and emulating what your parents show you, as that's how human nature is, to observe and emulate, that is what becomes ingrained in your nervous system. That's what becomes ingrained in you. And I went on to repeat that pattern with every relationship, whether it would be friendship or romantic relationship, including the neglect and the abandonment and the abuse. And so I married men who I felt like I could save, who I saw their potential, married right into abuse and emotional abandonment from the get-go. And unfortunately, my children were collateral damage. My son, not so much, but my daughter very much went on to repeat my same pattern because I married and had my daughter at 17, and we kind of grew up together. It wasn't until my third marriage, about 2 years into the relationship, we were only married a few months, when my father died. And my father and I were extremely enmeshed. When he had an issue, it was literally like I was having the same issue. So when I watched him die the last 4 months of his life and took care of him, it was like I was dying. It is a feeling unlike anything else, because when you're enmeshed, it is like it's you. There is no separation. He died 3 days before Thanksgiving. And when that happened, I was already in a spiritual awakening that started in 2008. So I was already seeing spirit. I was already feeling them. I've always been super intuitive. I've seen as a child, all of those things. But when my father died, it's like everything else shattered and everything extrasensory became extremely loud. I was hearing everybody's loved ones. I was feeling when people were sick that I couldn't see, that they didn't even know was wrong with them. I knew things that nobody could explain, on top of which also unlocked all of the trauma that I had repressed for 30 some odd years, from my sexual abuse trauma that I blacked out, or just the things that I had never processed. So on top of having to deal with and learning about how to communicate with something that I couldn't necessarily see at all times or experience or feel, I was also dealing with this massive excavation and upheavaling that was happening inside of me. I was literally feeling all the things that I repressed as a child that I wasn't safe for me to feel. And so 2015 was the year that everything burned down, everything opened up. It was one of the best and worst years of my entire life. But what it did for me in that process was allowed me to become super self-aware, which is what an awakening is anyway. In that self-awareness, I began to see my patterns. I am someone that also has the wound of denial. And when you are someone that's in denial, the only thing that breaks denial is recognizing that you're in denial. It's literally the only thing. Nobody can bring you out of it or convince you otherwise. I still remember the day I figured out the pattern that I was repeating, and that I was basically marrying my parents, right? Marrying my childhood wounds in order to reconcile them, was the hardest day for me to look in the mirror. And I remember the level of hate and disgust and shame that I felt in myself, because I was already a leader in that type of industry anyway. And I had to come to terms with the fact that I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know what I believed. And I had to start over. I tried to save face with my marriage, and I did the work while in the marriage, and it only grew us further apart and only allowed me to see more that the person I was with was never going to be able to meet the needs of who I actually was. And I didn't even still know. I was still learning and getting to know. And in 2020, I decided that there was no hope to move forward and filed for my third divorce. And that began the process of me jumping off the cliff and trying to figure out who I was. And I had to learn to choose me, which was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Because if you've been somebody who's been a people pleaser, if you've been somebody who has become what other people wanted you to be, dimmed your light, make sure you're not too much, or that you're, become more so that you're enough for that person, you're not being authentically who you are. You're a self-abandoning. And that was a really hard pill to swallow when you recognize that, yes, you were abandoned, but that's not the wound that you have to heal. The wound you have to heal is the self-abandonment, because that's when the abandonment wound heals. Because at some level, it always was self-abandonment. It was just you didn't know any better, and now you do. And so now I did. And when I chose myself, I lost my daughter. I lost a lot of my friends. Obviously, I had already walked away from my marriage. You become very lonely. You're just this person on this island trying to figure out who you are, because all the people that you were surrounded by, you no longer fit that, you're not that person anymore. And that was another hard thing. I was also battling stage 3 adrenal fatigue, because when you give that much without getting anything in return, it drains you beyond repair. It took me 5 years to heal my adrenal fatigue. It took me about 5 years to really figure out who I was. And I had to strip away all those masks, all those beliefs, all those perceptions. And that's something that will be ongoing. But I finally feel like I'm at the core of who I am. And when that happened, my light was so bright and so magnetic that I called in the people who love and accept me in all my forms, in my woo-woo side, in my wild side, in my quiet side, in my deep intellectual side. They accept all of me. And I just found my soul tribe, and I've been able to anchor into who I actually am at my core and what is true and not true for me. And so that's why I call it a great success, because I learned how to differentiate where I end and someone else begins, and that it's okay for me to be happy, to smile, even if my world's burning down around me, or even if my partner is not happy, or even if my friends are in a bad place. I don't have to change who I am or match their emotion. I just have to hold space for them and maintain who I am in that process. That's what energetic boundaries are. And I feel like it's one of the hardest lessons to learn, and one they should honestly teach in school because I think it would save a lot of people a lot of heartache in life. But it isn't an easy journey, but it's a success, because this story, while this is a very, very condensed version, has been published and will be published again. And it will be something that will become other people's survival guides. My testimony has become a survival guide for other people. And so it wasn't for nothing. I went through that at a soul level as a choice to master detachment, to master my frequency, to master my energetic boundaries. And it is something that I still work on every day. I still go through my processes of going, okay, I feel this, but is this mine or someone else's? And I still have to be very self-aware and very mindful, because it's very easy for any of us to lose ourselves in other people. Anyone who's listening to this, if you have an abandonment wound, if you feel like you have to change yourself to be loved or accepted, you don't. You are inherently worthy. You're the only one that determines your worth. And for a long time, my worth was solely determined on what I brought to the table and how I could make someone else's life better. And in that meantime, I neglected and abandoned myself. You don't have to do that. Cars don't drive without fuel or being charged. Planes don't fly without fuel. If you don't first fuel yourself, choose yourself, you will get sick, you will get drained, you will lose yourself. And you can still consider other people. I still consider other people. But now I'm the first person that I consider. I just can't tell you how different my perception on life is now that I have made it through that big piece. When things aren't going my way, when income isn't where it needs to be, when I haven't met the right partner, whatever is going on, I can still maintain my identity. I can still maintain my frequency. I can still be in a good mood. I no longer am taken down by everybody else. I wish that I would have learned this 20 years sooner, but I didn't. You just have to start slowly taking off those masks and asking yourself, like, is this version of me serving me? Is this what I actually believe? Is this what I actually want to do? And it's hard. There are days, yesterday, for example, I had plans. I was meant to go meet up with a friend. We were going to go to this event. It was just going to be me and him. And I had forgotten that I had allergy testing, and you're a little drained after that. And I had to back out of my plans. In the past, I just would have pushed through it, because people guilt you. Oh, we had these plans. I don't want to go alone. And I've just learned that that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to me and my well-being first and foremost. And when I do that, I teach others that I come first, right? So you teach people how to treat you by how you treat yourself. And I walked into 3 marriages teaching them, how can I serve you? What can I do for you? Same with all of the friends that I had. What can I do for you? How can I be there for you? How can I serve you? There's nothing wrong with that. But again, you have to be the first person in that you're choosing to serve. In that, like I said, I lost a lot of friends, and that's okay. And I now am on no contact with my daughter because I'm no longer able to be what she needs me to be, or wants me to be, I should say, but she's going through her own journey, right? And so I have to give her the space and the grace to accept that and to allow her through her own process. What this has taught me more than anything is surrender and trust. When we worry, it's not that we're not trusting ourselves. Is that I was trusting in the worst case scenario. I was trusting in the worst outcome, that person would reject me, abandon me, that I wouldn't be enough for them. And when I realized that, that's when a lot of things shifted. And I realized that I always trust myself. It's just, what am I trusting in? Am I trusting in the subconscious underneath that is telling me the story of abandonment and rejection, and that I'm not enough or that I'm too much? Or am I trusting in the truth of who I am, which I have had to learn to get to know and love? Is that I'm inherently worthy, and that I need to focus on me and choose me. And in doing that, I will find people that honor that and who choose me too. That's pretty much my story in a nutshell. And I just hope that this reaches the people that need to hear this the most, because the abandonment wound, I think, is something that most of us have at different levels, whether it's physical abandonment or emotional abandonment. I experienced all facets of it, and the universe can only mirror back to you what you are. You can only manifest what you are. So if you're calling in people who are emotionally unavailable, or people who are rejecting you all the time, or people who think you're too much or not enough, you have to look in the mirror and you have to say, where in me do I believe this? Where am I assuming or defaulting to this? And how can I change that story? And how can I change that narrative? Because that's where it is. It starts with the awareness of, okay, I have a responsibility in this. And that's a hard pill to swallow, I know. But once you do that, now you're in the driver's seat. Now you're in power. And it empowered me. It fueled me to go, oh, because I have a responsibility in this, and because I'm no longer requiring my parents to tell me how sorry they were, or that they should have done better, or people in my life the same thing. I was like, oh, it's my job. It's my job to empower me. It's my job to choose me. It's my job to say no. It's my job to say I am enough, and that I am going to be okay, and that the right person will respect my boundaries and honor them the same way I would want them to do for themselves. When you can do that, you will begin to heal your abandonment wound. And it's not an easy journey, but it is surely a worthwhile one.